Geology. This is Daniel Minizini, your inquisitive geologist. Today we are traveling along the inner loop of Houston. So KPFT HD3 channel, not in Montrose today, but in the highways, the beating heart of Houston, with a lot of traffic here, where we're gonna go and visit Bert Bally. We're gonna interview him, this giant of geology. He spent his time working on stratigraphic, tectonic, and plate tectonic processes. We're gonna go and visit him in his place, at his house. We're gonna have it with us at the Mini Geology radio show. Here we are, close to his place, and we're gonna see him pretty soon. All right. Bert Bally was born in 1925. He was born in the Netherlands, and he went to study to Italy, and then he he went to live in Italy, then he went to study in Switzerland and live in the US. Let's see. Okay, here we are with our friend Bert Bally. Good morning, Bert.
Good morning, how are you?
I'm very fine. We're very fine. We're here with a Mini Geology radio show, and we are gonna interview you today.
Fantastic.
So can I sit around here and
You sit here, wherever you want to sit. There's another chair here.
All right. Bert Bally, born 1925.
Yes, of course.
Born in the Netherlands.
No, born in the Netherlands, right.
A youth in Italy.
No, first in Indonesia.
Then in Italy.
Yeah, 5 years in Indonesia, then in Italy.
And then is where you became intrigued with the local geology?
In Italy.
Then you went to...
In Italy, it's important to know. I became in geology by stealing various marble types from the Forum Romanum in Rome.
Studies in Switzerland.
In Switzerland, yeah.
And then you went to work in the US.
I went for a year to Lamont Geological Observatory, and that was presently what today you would call it climate change study. They were already going on that's nothing new. We were doing it at that time at Lamont.
So Bert had a dual career in industry at Shell and in academia at Rice, where he's still a professor. He focused on structural, sedimentological, and plate tectonic processes, and he had numerous awards. The last one, be honored to be a member of the most ancient science academy, the Academy of the Lynx.
Right.
L'Accademia dei Lincei, founded in 1603. One of his very first members was Galileo Galilei.
Right.
So, you explain us, who is Bert Bally?
Who is Bert Bally? Well, I myself, I traveled a lot, and I enjoyed myself doing geology and traveling and seeing the world.
So, Bert, you're pretty humble to describe you as such. Do you think you are more a researcher, a scientist, a professional of the geology?
I think I'm a generalist. I started off as my thesis area was in Italy, La Madre Maiella. It's a very important mountain. You can visit it. It became a national park. So my thesis area became a national park, and an important aspect of that thesis work that I did a lot of micropaleontology. So I basically was a very well-trained micropaleontologist on thin section micropaleontology of carbonate rocks.
Bert, what is your legacy?
My legacy? My students. I had a lot of stuff. Where I took early retirement from shale oil, where I had a good career, a lot of it in Canada and then in many places of the world. And but I decided to start a second career by going to Rice University, and so my legacy are my students.
So if you wouldn't have moved to the university, you wouldn't have had a legacy. I probably would have a legacy. Probably one of the key publications I made was one in the Canadian Rocky Mountains, where we for the first time integrated reflection seismic profiles with foreland folded belts. And it was important work which led to the discovery of the Waterton field, which was discovered, I don't remember when, but when I was in Canada. And it's still producing oil now. How important it is to, conceptually, to move from industry after several decades that you work in industry into university in order to satisfy or give a meaning to what you are doing?
Well, you have to change your outlook because you're dealing with students, and the most important thing at the Rice were my students. As it was, at the time, there were very few seismic lines available. And I grew up in the oil industry with interpretation of seismic lines. So the first thing I did is I talked to the AAPG, and I told them that I'd like to have some seismic atlases. So this was a matter of a little conversation on one of the meetings. And the AAPG said, yes, tell me what you want to do. I wrote them a little letter what I wanted to do. And they went ahead, and I wrote letters to everybody I knew with seismic lines and told them, you can publish a paper on seismic lines with no peer review. In other words, we didn't want to burden the authors with a lot of reviews on the seismic interpretation or anything else. And as far as, simply typing errors and so on, the APG would take care of it. And I had instant report and produced 3 volumes of seismic atlases, structural atlases, and later on 3 volumes of stratigraphic atlases.
So you were already foreseeing the issue with the bureaucracy and protocols of editing a book. Nowadays it's probably even more and more difficult.
Not really. The APG was very, very easy. And I'm still dealing with the APG right now, and they are very, very easy to work with. No problem at all. So right now, as you probably know, I made a series of global maps, various aspects of global maps, basin tectonics, whatever have you. And I'm working with them right now. I work with one chapter after another. It's a process which has now gone on for about 2 years, and I hope to get done with it by sometimes July this year.
So, Bert, do you remember when you changed your mind and you decided to leave industry to go to academia? Did it happen something special? It was like a
No, not really. I did have a sabbatical advice at MIT. They gave me a year time to teach courses at MIT, which I enjoyed very much. So I figured it would be time to do something different. And obviously the time would be only worthwhile if I would take early retirement. So I took an early retirement, which was quite good. I still have a shale pension. But I took an early retirement and decided to do a different career.
And Many geologists, they have your atlases on their desk. So that is to say that we all recognize the success that you had in your career. What do you think is related to your professional success?
Well, mostly my students. The thing is that I had a whole bunch of students from all over the world, and today that would not be possible anymore.
Why not?
Because the university, they like to have students with projects which are supported by the National Science Foundation, and they come with an overhead for the university. My students came with no overhead at all. They just came with information, and they came from all over the world, and there were no questions asked, so I was able to find students from Argentina, Brazil, Peru, Mexico.
So you, in a way, you disseminated your knowledge through your students.
Right.
And that was the secret of success, and to be known all over the world.
Yeah, well, it related that. Obviously, it relates to by being known somehow by people. Yeah.
And how much of this success was related to your merit or to the lack of contingency of the situation?
Well, I think the main reason why the beginning of my success, my professional career, if you wish, was in Canada. And I published a paper on the Canadian foothills, which was the first paper ever published on integrating seismic reflection profiles in the foreland folded belt. And that remains, today still is a fundamental reference. If you look around, you find there is no paper like published in Canada anymore. It's the last one on it. It was quite a while ago when it was published. So you know, it was just a combination of seismic profiles and the Canadian foreland folded belt. And what helped me particularly was my experience in Switzerland, where we had a complete training, what we call these axial projections, which is basically there's a name for that projection, it escapes me right now. But it's a good projection, it's a down plunge view of any folded belt, so it allows you the different superposed position to put it straight from, you can read it straight off the map. You could squeeze the map and you end up with a cross section ideally.
Bert, what are your, if you think about your many experience in your professional career, what is something that you may remember as a very exciting moment and a very sad moment? Well,
the most exciting moment probably for me was the work I did in Sicily as a student. I was asked, because I knew Italian geology, I was asked by Gulf Oil to evaluate and map a permit in southeast Sicily, which the Ragusa Plateau. And so my boss basically drove me in the field every day and picked me up in the evening. And he taught me how to write some English reports. I didn't know any English. I never had a formal English lesson in my life, so I had to learn that by what I call osmosis, not a bad process. And so I was lucky to have that appointment, and the appointment was on a piece of acreage which was obtained by the first president of the AAPG. So it was a fairly well-known person who got that acreage, and I had to grade a number of prospects from 1 to, I don't know how many there were, about a dozen prospects. And the first prospect was the prospect of Ragusa. And it was very easy to decide Ragusa was the first mine because there was an asphalt mine right on top of it. So there was no great science involved in it, common sense. Meaning that common sense is probably more important in the earth sciences than anything else. So, and Ragusa was discovered. To my knowledge, Ragusa is still producing today. And that was when it was discovered. It was in the around 1952, if I remember right. So you have a field which produces for between 52 and today, how many years that is, and it's still producing.
Bert, is it true that during those years in Sicily you were arrested? Arrested and put in jail?
I did what?
You were arrested by the Carabinieri?
Oh yeah, I was arrested several times in my life.
Oh, several times.
But in Sicily, the main event was that they arrested me because my boss drove me out every day and picked me up in the evening when I did my field work. And the farmers decided I was the guy who stole all their chicken. So they immediately told the police to arrest me. And it was very fortunate that the week before we had visited the president of Sicily. At the time it was Presidente Estivo. So they phoned with people in Palermo and they let me go again. I also was arrested earlier when in my Cesis area, in a village. My Cesis area was in the Maiella, a well-known mountain in Italy. Now it's a national park. And in the Cesis area I was arrested because there was a village there which was run by communists, and they wanted to show how patriotic they were. And they decided that I was a communist spy. So the communists arrested me because they thought I was a communist spy, Russian or whatever else, and they put me to jail there. And again, I had to phone in Casoli, so they could straighten them out that I was the real stuff. You know?
And then also in the north of Italy.
Huh?
You were arrested also in the north of Italy, by the border, Italy and
Oh yeah, I was arrested.
Austria?
Yeah, this was an interesting thing. Right after the war, a friend of mine, we decided to, when Mussolini, they hung him up in Milan and all this sort of thing. So a friend of mine decided to go and make a quick trip in Italy. He went over a pass which went from Switzerland to Italy. It was there was only a trail there. And before you know it, there was a bunch of Alpini soldiers who arrested us and they said we had no business to sit on Italian. We probably were sitting on the Italian part of the border, like about 10 yards. And they took us down to an interesting place, Germasino. Germasino, we were placed and arrested and put in a cell, which was the last cell where Mussolini was before he was picked up to be hanged in Milano.
How many days were you in a cell?
In Germasino, that's my friend and I, we were about 3 days. They had to phone to Como, the authorities, and then they decided to, under guard of the Alpinis, they put us right back where we came from. And right a few days after, we went on the other side in Italy, from the other side of Italy, back in Italy, and everything was just fine. We were welcome again.
What about a sad moment of your professional career?
I don't have any. I don't remember any sad moments of my career.
And you have known a lot of characters related to geology in this 92 years and a half of your life. So, who impressed you the most?
Who impressed me the most? That's a difficult question. There are many people that became my good friends, and I got to know them through their work, and there's no particular person I want to single out. You know, there are a lot of colleagues and friends of mine, and we worked together. It was not a matter of being impressed one way or another. It was just friendship. We've spent some time in the field, or we spent some time on field trips, whatever we did, you know. It's not,
Is there on the other side anybody that disappoints you a lot?
No, not really. Not really.
And so, Bert, we just
You have to
mentioned...
learn how to forgive, eh?
That's very important.
It's not you know, if somebody does something silly,
That's the secret of longevity.
you decide, well, that was a silly thing to do, and like with your own children, you know, and you just forget about it, you know.
What are the conclusions in the balance of your life?
The conclusions?
When you think about the balance of your own life, how do you see it from the top of your 92 years and a half?
Well, that's difficult to say. I had a good life. I had a lot of exposure to geology in many countries. Some of the most exciting time, I spent a lot of time in China, working with the Chinese. I've been working with the Chinese for several decades, still working with them. So it's the broad international nature. I've worked in, as I said, in Latin America and in India. Spent a lot of time in India too with the Indian oil companies. So it's just cumulative, the whole thing. It's not you don't single anything out particularly.
Any regrets?
No. Why would I have any regrets? I had a very fun, exciting life, saw a lot of parts of the world, and had a good life with my first wife. She passed away, unfortunately, and I have a good life with my second wife, and a good relationship with my children, and they're all doing their own thing, so it's just fine.
What is next for you?
What is next? Well, what is next, the most important thing is the project I'm doing right now, is what I decided some years ago. I published a book with my friend David Roberts, 3 volumes, on, where are they? Cannot hear. Yeah, I think I gave them away. Regional geology of the world, basically 3 volumes. They were published by Elsevier. And when we did the whole thing, we decided to add a whole series of maps to the whole thing. So there were a series of about 38 maps, global maps, everything, sedimentary basins, earthquakes, you name it, everything. And so I decided to, and the maps I copyrighted in my own thing to make sure that I can use them anytime I want to without asking Elsevier for publication. So what I'm doing now is I'm publishing the maps again with the AAPG as part of their search and discovery files. Hope to get it done by end July this year or something. And the idea there is to have the maps, and the maps will have, the maps are there. If you want to take a picture of them, I can show you if you want to.
Oh, we'll do it later, of course.
Right, okay. So the maps are there, and the thing I did is I add very few comments to the maps, just a few paragraphs, and then a list of references, and most of the references, not all, but most of them, like 95% of them are post-year 2000. The idea is, you know, a long list of reference, people will fall asleep over the whole thing, or they pick what they want to. The idea is to have the newest publications and use them to dig deeper and find out more about what you want to know. So that's the project I'm working on right now. I hope to get done by the end of July. And that's about it. And when that is done, I think I'm going to write an autobiography for my children. I had an interesting life, you know. I traveled all over the world and seen so much, worked with so many people from so many countries. And,
talking about children or youngsters, now that you have exposed your entire life and career in these very few minutes, and we know that you are a member of the most ancient Academy of Science in the world, member close to Galileo Galilei. Yeah. What are your suggestions for the students that are studying like the earth sciences, or the young professionals that are living today in this country, but also in the other countries of the world?
I think the biggest problems the students right now, they're all so specialized because the funding of research, particularly in the US and other countries, a little bit less so, but the funding research is due through the National Science Foundation, and it is basically aimed at or one of the aspects of it's not aimed, it's one of the aspects of it is the National Science Foundation projects. You can charge an overhead which goes to the university. So that channels things, research basically in items which are fashionable. And if you want to do something unfashionable, which looks like you're looking at old stuff or something like that, not much sure. So what you end up is a literature right now of very highly specialized papers, very highly targeted, very highly specialized. And my main problem is that you must be aware of the context. You must be aware of the regional context, of the plate tectonic context, or whatever context is important.
So what is your suggestion for the students?
There's not much I can suggest because they're basically in the US, they're certainly in a funding system which does what it does. It does work on highly specialized, important problems. But what my students had, I made sure that they had an overview. And the vehicle for the overview, strangely enough, was always seismic profiles. In other words, it's all right to look at microfossils, which I did. It's all right to look at limestones, which I did. But you must have the regional setting in mind. So it's very much important to have the regional overview for whatever you're doing. That's the reason why David Roberts and I, we published those 3 volumes with Elsevier on regional geology of the world. And right now I'm working with 2 colleagues, 2 Italian colleagues in London to work on the 2nd edition of that regional geology of the world. So this is a work which is evolving as we go along.
I like very much, and I learned from you the concept of looking at the big picture, in other terms looking at the regional geology, then going telescopically down to study the details, like in your case it could be the microbe organisms, or mine the grain sizes of the rocks, and then understanding something there, and then coming back to put what you understood in the big picture again.
That's correct. That's really, really, really important. You have to understand the context. I have an interesting example in Canada, which is the discovery of the Waterton field. Waterton field is a very large gas field. And when I came to Calgary, I was, of course, trained in alpine geology, and we learned everything about axial projections, down plunge projections, very, very important. And so one of the first things I did, I squeezed the map so it looked like a cross-section. And there was a big overthrust, the Lewis overthrust, and you saw right away that there was a bunch of carbonate thrust sheets diving under the Lewis overthrust. You could see that simply by squeezing the map. So there was no particular genius on the whole thing. But what it was is that I had enough background from my Swiss education to see that a regional downplunge projection is very important. Now, that's one thing. The other thing, when you arrive in any area, which I've done for many years, particularly when I worked for Shell, is make sure you understand the geography of the area completely in a broader context. So when I came to Canada, I said, first of all, fly me over the Rocky Mountains. So they flew me over the Rocky Mountains with a plane. That was I sat next to the pilots. They turned right, turned left. And then we took some photographs of the whole thing. And so I got a sense of how big it was. The other thing I had is I wanted to make a transect basically from Calgary to Vancouver to the coast. The main problem with the transect was that I didn't know how to drive. So I couldn't do it myself. So I had a driver, Sam Osuchov was his name. He was from Saskatchewan, and Sam was very clever. He drove me most of the things so I could do my geology, but whenever there was a steep cliff looking down the valley, he says I had to drive. So I learned pretty quickly to drive safely. It was a nice exercise. But at the same time, we make a transect all the way to Vancouver Island, and we had an immediate overview of what it was. That was way back when. It's a long time ago.
Bert, you experienced in your lifetime the evolution of technology. You have seen so many changes, not just related to the sciences, to the earth sciences, but also in your life. Do you have a sense on how the naturalistic thought evolved contemporaneously with the technology?
Well, the technology is interesting. A good example is 3D seismic. 3D seismic, I don't know when it was evolved quite a few years ago anyway. First, before we go to 3D seismic, remember that seismic, reflection seismology, came over here by some German people who worked in the German army, and basically it was part of the activities of what they call artillery observation. Now it just so happens that when I had my military training in Switzerland, we all had military training, I was an artillery observer. The artillery observer is mainly aiming at finding, by looking at the propagation of sounds, by having a system of microphones, locating the enemy's guns, and also the impact of the guns of the shells of the enemy. So artillery observing was very important for me, being an artillery observer of the Swiss army. Turned out that many years earlier, a similar group of people came, I think they were Germans, came to the US after the World War II, and they started the whole seismic industry here in the United States and in the world. So there's a relationship, in my mind, there's a relationship between artillery observing and seismic. And you have many things. I was on the recording team anything, you had to learn how to put, we had long telephone lines, so we had great big cable things. Somewhere I see a picture of that, and I don't know where it is. So we had to lay cables around various trees and the whole thing in the country, and learn everything, including delta T. I was a delta T reader of the artillery. Most people don't know that, but then a lot of people don't know that there was a micropaleontologist too. You know? So you do all kind of things as you go along.
And you felt comfortable evolving in your naturalistic thought. You were comfortable with the evolution of the technology. You always tried to apply that.
Yeah, absolutely. Now in the artillery, I had no choice. It was evolving as I was there, and particularly in the Swiss Alps, it was quite interesting to do artillery because of all the echoes you have to eliminate the echoes and everything else. So yeah.
Where do you think that research is today? Is it in the army, as you mentioned? Is it in the universities? Is it in the labs of the corporations? Is it in the vendors? Who's doing real, pure research?
I think a lot of people do it in various places. I don't think you can particularly single out anything. Like Geological Service, they do a lot of good research. The USGS is a great organization. Canadian Service is a great organization. Most national service are quite good.
Do you still see that we do research not for the sake of curiosity rather than apply research, because the world around the...
Well, the applied research is most people in academia don't want to do that, but the applied research is basically developed on works on its own, marches to its own drummer. Schlumberger is a classical case. Schlumberger has a very nice publication, the Oil Field Review, which you can get on Google anytime you want to, and you can get the advance of Schlumberger research. Now, my guess is that very few people in academia spend any time bothering looking at the Oil Field Review. Have you ever looked at it?
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
After your suggestion.
Yeah. All right, good. The Oil Field Review is a great thing, eh? But it's not the accepted publication standards, you know. There's no peer review and all that sort of stuff. But it is a tremendous information source for all kinds of things.
Do you think that the peer review is more of an obstacle rather than what it is, a peer review?
No, the peer review is just fine. That's a way to make sure that things are published. But the reviewer of your peer review does you a favor in telling you what is not understandable in what you've done. So it's basically an editor before it's being published. So the peer review is a great system.
Do you think that some researchers, they are a little bit snob, they don't read contributions that are not peer reviewed?
Well, there are snobs in all professions. It's not only researchers, you know.
What do you think is the next big leap that geology needs to do in order to mature as a discipline?
Well, that's probably not the next thing, but one of the things, one of the largest sources of information, which is basic and not used because it's not available to everybody, is 3D seismic. 3D seismic is very important because it gives you a 3D view, of course, and one of the first things when you go to 3D seismic, when I look at 3D seismic, being an old photogeologist if you wish, I immediately go through and look through some time slices. So you don't even, you read up where it is and what it's from, you get some background on it. But I immediately go through time slices. The first impression on 3D seismic you find is that 3D time slices they change constantly. So there's nothing concordant. Everything is discordant, either due to faulting or to folding or disharmony. There's nothing. So you have to learn, and that is a science which, in my mind, I don't think is not particularly taught one way. Is that you have to go and look at 3D seismic by going through the whole block and not look at your objective section. The problem with oil companies and also with academic researchers with 3D is that they have an objective section. They say, I want to do this, and the whole thing, they focus on that. When you do that, you say, I'm not really interested in the context. 3D seismic is a magnificent tool to do the context I can show you in a moment.
So it should be more available to students, for instance?
Well, of course, it would be wonderful to make it available, but it's probably not. I have one project here which maybe we can look at later on in a moment, which I did with a Chinese student in China. And what you do is you look at the 3D, and what you want to do is you want to have the 3D seismic integrated with everything geological. Now, I don't know whether you've ever seen anything which integrates all these things. The answer is probably no, because I've never seen it except what this Chinese researcher did with me, and it was never published. So it's really, really important to have 3D seismic understood in the regional context. I'm not aware of a single publication or an atlas which does this for an area, and that's the future.
Or maybe is hidden somewhere in the privacy of the corporations, who knows?
Well, the big problem, of course, is data confidentiality. I'll show you later on in a moment. The project I did with the Chinese student has never been published, but it shows you what you can do, and it boggles the mind. You have to put the regional seismic in the whole thing, you have to put the regional stratigraphy in it, everything. So the potential of 3D is vastly underused, because the people who use it are objective censored. They told you our research, we, the oil company presumably, says, we are interested in this. And they don't know they have a database which there's got so many other things they can't even imagine. So it's an interesting thing.
Bert, which have been the key questions that you pose yourself in your career? The most important questions that you struggle with, that you wanted to solve?
I didn't want to solve any questions. I guess the very most important thing was the regional context. You have to know what the regional context is. This is why we published the volumes with David Roberts on regional geology. And it is very important to know the context and also to know what method fits in the whole thing.
Have your interest in geology, has it evolved in the course of your career? Which kind of evolution did your thoughts have?
No, it's an evolution, but it's driven a lot by industry. Advances it, I don't think it would advance. Obviously, there are some research projects, different in different areas, like in the oceans, the deep sea drilling program was the driver. Onshore, it's most of the oil companies, depending in different areas, it's different. So everything evolves through time, and there's never a stop.
And do you think that evolution is driven, as you said, by industry, or is more like a conceptual exercise that you do and you are more conscious of? I
think it's both. It's both. The deep sea drilling program exploration defined by academic targets, if you wish. People have different reasons for wanting to know, and they try to make tools available for them, and the key thing is to use them as best as possible.
And when you move from 30 plus years in industry, and now you are more than 30 years in academia, did your thoughts change? Did your freedom increase for doing research?
That's an interesting question. The answer is yes. The key to the whole thing was the publication of the seismic atlases. When I left Shell, people say, "What do? You don't have any seismic anymore." And all I did is I went to Ron Hart at the AAPG and says, "I want to have a seismic atlas." I saw him in a meeting. "I want to have seismic atlas." And they say, "Yes, why not?" That's the answer. There was no question anything. There no committee, no nothing. AAPG decided, yes, you want to have seismic atlases. And then they say, "Well, how do you want to go about the whole thing?" And I said, "I want to be an international thing." But the key thing is that I think it didn't take me more than 2 years at Rice, that I had my first set of seismic atlases published. What it was then that I had through those atlas projects, I had access to seismic profiles all over the world by simply asking for them. Now, why would they send me an asking the AAPG a seismic profile for an atlas? Huh? Very simple. I told them there will be no peer review. In other words, you bring a seismic line, we won't question your interpretation as long as you have an interpreted and non-interpreted profile with it, as long as the two are separate. And that was basically the only thing.
Does it mean that you felt more freedom in the university to do?
Well, I found the freedom was found through the APG, not through the university.
So it's not true that the universities, they give you more freedom of thought?
No, it wasn't. I went to university in order to do that. I couldn't have done it if I worked for an oil company. And it was the APG. So it's really important is the role of the APG as a promoter of science data. It's an incredible organization, the APG, unbelievable. So within 2 years, I had 3 volumes of tectonic regional profiles of the world. Huh? And I got them by simply telling them, your paper will not be peer-reviewed, except for commas and semicolons and other things like that, as long as you have an interpreted, non-interpreted profile.
So you advocate in favor of the geological associations to be part of them, to stick with them, and to support them.
In the case of the APG, it's unbelievable what they have done. Can you imagine me talking to a guy at the APG on a casual meeting? I said, I want an atlas. And the man says, yes, let's do it. He goes back to his people and says, let's do it. And I said, there's going to be no peer review. And they say, let's do it. So that the personal relationship, which are good. But you have to give them some interesting scope with it. And it paid well for the APG. It was an incredible thing for my students, because they were the first ones to access seismic profiles all over the world. An example are the profiles across the Po Plain. Beautiful profiles. Huh? I got them I got to know Gopi before. It was in Egypt. I met him on various meetings, and yes, we spoke Italian with each other. We know each other, and so I got these beautiful lines. But there was no. I did not make a fancy proposal or anything else. It was.
With the feedback that you got in the course of the years after you published the atlases and they were worldwide distributed, what was the feedback that you got? So what were the things that you would like to improve in those atlases? Is there anything that it could be
Not really. I think maybe it's time to produce a new set of atlases, but otherwise not really, no.
Okay, and so Bert, in your life, you have been like very focused on the geology. Now, if you step back, how do you see yourself in what you have done for the society, the great society of people that they have nothing to do with geology, like your wives? What did they think about you working so much on geology?
Well, my first wife passed away, and my second wife, they're also very supportive, you know. They knew that I was obsessed with geologists, I guess. But they also traveled with me to many places, so we had a lot of fun traveling in many places. So you combine things the best way you can. So it's.
So you're satisfied with your contribution to society in general terms?
Well, you know, you do what you can, and I keep doing it by producing this second edition of my world maps, and hopefully I'll get done with it pretty soon.
And according to your point of view, what did money measure in your lifetime?
Money?
Yes. Was it the measure of success, or having more money just a random thing that you don't really understand why it happened?
Well, money is a different thing. When you're being paid, you work for an oil company, you get pretty paid well. If you have a pension from an oil company, you get a good pension. And so money is important. And also investing your money is important, you know, you've got to do that. But that's, you know, everybody has to do his thing with money, whatever they think they can do.
But do you think that the smarter you are, the more money you get?
Not necessarily. There's some very smart people with a lot of money who do some stupid things, including presidents of the United States. Take that off the interview.
Yeah, Bert, reaching the end now of this interview, do you want to talk about the relationship between research and religion, or in your life? How important could be religion in the life of a researcher like you?
Well, I'm a Catholic. Used to be a Protestant, but I converted. And religion is important. It's a different experience. And obviously you have to reconcile those things as good as you can. You know, it's not, you know, you don't have all the answers. Nobody has all the answers. And religion is a good way to find some answers to things you don't understand. So, you know.
Do you want to share with us what are those topics where you feel the heal of religion, where you feel that religion can help in a daily life?
Well, I became a Catholic quite recently, so not that long. Before I was a Protestant. But I always had a good respect for religion, and you know, I grew up in Rome. Let's face it, you cannot ignore religion, you know, when you know all the aspects in Rome. Very few people grow up in Rome. You didn't grow up in Rome, did you?
I didn't grow up in that magical city, but I know enough.
I grew up in the magical city. Guess under whose auspices? He was under Benito Mussolini's auspices, you know. And I went to a German school, so we had visitors from Adolf Hitler, Benito Mussolini, you name it, the whole thing. So I know how idiotic leaders can bring the world into war, cause a lot of damage, You know, I've seen Italy before the war, during the war, after the war. So you got to know one thing. After the war, which I was quite impressed with, is nobody really knows much about that. I was in my thesis area. Okay, why did I take my thesis area? I was in Italy, Maiella, and I selected that because when we were in Rome growing up, we had a friend of us who took us to various trips and various mountains in the surroundings of Rome. Once we went to Montevideo, which is sort of in the central Apennines, and they say, way back, vedi la Madre Maiella, huh? So the Madre Maiella to me was like a magnet. And I decided to go, my thesis, I want to go to the Madre Maiella. And that's what I did. I got my thesis done. And today it's a national park. So, you know, it's not bad. And I had something to do with it.
Yes. Bert, is there anything else that you want to add, that you want to shout out to this big audience that is listening to you?
No, have fun. Have fun. Enjoy people. Respect people. And you know, enjoy life.
Thank you very much, Bert. This was a Mini Geology radio show, KPFT, HD3 channel. Yeah. I'm Daniel Minizini, your inquisitive geologist. You can write us at minigeology@gmail.com, or you can listen to this interview also at minigeology.com, which is a YouTube channel. You can also Google Mini Geology and Rice University and you'll see our partnership, and you may see many other special characters like Bert in here.
One last word. La vita del geologo è una vita santa, si mangia, beve e canta.
E con questo buonanotte a tutti!
Bene,
Ciao!